Good to be with you here at Midweek Manna once again, as we are well into our new start of a new year, 2024. And as I had shared in a weekend service, those New Year's resolutions, how are you doing? New Year's resolutions statistically are unsuccessful. Only 9% of them attain the goal. And it's a high percentage that doesn't even make it out of the first week, which, of course, we're already past that. And then by the end of the first month, January, almost 50% has failed. So I trust that your New Year's resolutions are still intact. Maybe they've wobbled a little bit, but stay with them. We're just human, okay? I'm not one of them prudes who, well, that's just silly thinking and blah, 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 blah. And even if statistics are against the majority, that does not mean it's against you. And if you have come into a season of new beginnings, our attention is drawn to that. And there are things about your life, your devotion life, your family life, your financial responsibilities, pursuit of something that has been in your heart, and you realize I'm not getting any younger, make a good plan and do it in incremental steps that is attainable, not unrealistic. Stay focused with them and pursue them. If it's weight loss, if it's weight gain, if it is drawing closer to the Lord, if it is some kind of exercise regimen, again, stay with it. We get one life. And that's what I tried to bring out in that weekend message. A segment of it is, and I read from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, when God takes the time in His Word to tell us that He gives us life, and that life can be enjoyable and should be enjoyable. It does not mean it won't have rainy days. It doesn't mean that it won't have setbacks. But the overall, He says, I want you to eat. I want you to drink. I want you to enjoy the fruit of your labor, or the toil of your hands. And I think that many times as Christians, we can get out of balance. And if you know anything about me, there are two words that just keep showing up in my conversations, in my vocabulary, when it comes to leading people, influencing people, instructing people, whether it's for marriage, whatever. And that is the word process and the word balance. Very few things in life comes with one step. Usually it takes many steps. It's a process. Stay with it. Persevere. Obviously, our growth, our faith in God is process. Sanctification is process. And then balance. We can get out of balance. And trust me, I've pastored long enough. You can get unbalanced with even good things, because they take on a role that they were never designed for. When it comes to godliness, when it comes to modesty, if we're not careful, we let that become the goal in itself instead of God. And that's what I brought out in that message, is pursue Jesus and let these other things balance out and process. That didn't cost you any extra. But we're going to, again, 1 Peter. We are going to be in chapter 5. We're going to read the first 4 verses. We'll probably get to the 5th verse in this time together. And then we'll have one more time together as we will conclude the study found in 1 Peter. And then we're going to go right on over to 2 Peter. 2 Peter probably, without doubt, was Peter's final letter because he probably was martyred shortly after that letter. Peter had this major role in Christendom and its formation, and yet we don't have the letters compiled like that of Paul. But once again, you see the will of God in a person's life. We don't all do the same thing, do we? And as we go into 1 Peter chapter 5, first 4 verses, you notice this little guy been kind of creeping up here once in a while. Well, there he is. You see, we got a good vibe going on. So let's keep a good vibe. We don't want 2024 to turn into this guy, I guess most people see blue as feeling blue, but that's my favorite color. So that's why I choose a blue vibe. Whatever the case, whatever your favorite color is, keep a good vibe going on. I just noticed that little guy has a frown on his face, and this guy's got the smile. So that was the original design. So we'll just keep this guy for a good vibe, even though I like the color blue. All right. 1 Peter chapter 5, let's read the first 4 verses. So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. I love that. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Wow, this is good stuff. So again, it's been the transition through Christmas and New Year's, and maybe some of you are just getting back and you've missed 1 or 2 of the sessions. That's why we do this, and just get into the archives there and find the ones that you've missed. Or, of course, they're always there for you to repeat. And again, to kind of catch up to where we don't just jump into the last part of this letter. We realize, once again, this is from Peter, not Paul. And so even these statements right here we're getting ready to look into, he definitely was walking with the Lord in his earthly ministry. Paul was not. And notice again that this letter, its purpose was to go to fellow believers. Again, Peter's ministry primarily was to the Jewish nation, where Paul, even though being a Jew, was this ramrod that God was using, a plow, to open up the privilege that you and I have today as Gentiles to receive the Word of God. That does not mean that Peter didn't have an awakening, because he did. And so he is writing to those primarily Jewish believers who have been dispersed. And of course, now they are in different regions. So this letter is designed for a regional attachment. I must say here that we have 2 letters from Peter. Did he write others? I'm convinced that he did. They're not in the Word of God. Did Paul just write 12, maybe 13, looking at Hebrews, who wrote that? I'm convinced that Paul had many other letters. So we're back to this trusting of the earliest followers that had walked with the Lord, and then those who came under the influence of the original apostles, and the scrutiny that they had to go through with scribes to be able to do this thing called canonization, that yes, this is accepted as authentic and inspired of God and fueled by the Holy Spirit. With all that being said, now we come to this reading. And you notice that, again, we've just said that it is to all those who have been dispersed. Well, they weren't all preachers, as we would use that verbiage today. They weren't all apostles. They weren't all elders, is the general term. And yet, we have in this letter of so many things that we've shared now over these many weeks, he takes the time to reach out to elders. But it isn't just to those serving as elders, but an understanding of the work of an elder. So this is good. Without a doubt, the most important, not solely important, but the signature most important role in the work of the church generally is the work of an elder. Now, the work of an elder isn't just for those original followers of Jesus, as some would like to teach, the original apostles. We see this work that's being done, and the word elder itself covers leadership. And so it is obvious in Paul's letters, wherever Paul went, to do an apostolic work, to establish a church as we know it today. Most of them were in homes, sometimes might be gathering at a synagogue when available, sometimes by the creek. An assembly place. The first thing he did is appoint elders. Were they all credentialed with the Church of God International? No. Had they all gone through formal training? No. So they were looking for those who had leadership ability, but who were walking the walk, talking the proper talk, and being esteemed by their presbytery or the other worshipers in that group. Could have been 4 people, could have been 10 people, could have been 50 people, whatever the case. So we see that this thinking here of the role of elder didn't just start with Peter, and it didn't just start with Paul, and it didn't just start with the Jewish nation on into Judaism. We know that the number of the Sanhedrin was 70. Well, where does that come from? Well, I'm glad you asked. So we go back to the book of Numbers, and I won't read it. We're going to read verse 16, 17, but basically what we would pick up in your own study of verse 10, and Moses is weary. He's tired. He's overwhelmed. He's overworked and underpaid. And in other words, he had here, when you read it, the attitude of, I didn't sign up for this. Hey, I didn't go swimming in the Nile by myself. I didn't have Pharaoh's daughter pick me up. I didn't grow up in Egypt on purpose. It just so happened. I got ran out of there and never intended to go back. God, you're the one that sent me back. It was not a vacation. It was not a pleasant situation in almost all situations. And then to lead those immigrants out of Egypt to a promised land, and because of failure, being hung up in a wilderness for 40 more years. Because when you study the life of Moses, it's 120 years, but it was 3 distinct eras in his life, and all being around 40 years. So here he is now hearing the people complain, and now he's going to God and venting. It's okay to vent. And, he said, I hear the people complaining. What am I supposed to do with all these people? I didn't sign up for this. How am I going to feed all these people? There's just things going on with them that should be. I need help. So verse 16, then the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. So this is a paradigm shift. No longer just one, now 71. Verse 17, and I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. It'd be worth you reading all of that chapter before what I read and after. So this is where, again, the elder mentality comes from. And so it wasn't then just elders over at that time with Moses. The people, the 12 tribes, were still together. Now we know that Joshua comes into the promised land, and the tribes get their parcels of land. And so they're not meeting in one valley with one tent of meeting any longer. Without a doubt, Jerusalem has been established and a temple has been erected. However, the work of the church now has learned, we got to go beyond that. We need elders in every hamlet, every village, every community. And that carries over to today. We know that from that model, it didn't just stay with the Israelites. We see that Egypt adapted. We see that Rome itself, and yes, Greece, all developed eldership programs. So again, the responsibility of leadership that's needed, as well as, of course, the people's understanding of it. Now, with that being said, he goes on and he starts describing, we're back to 1 Peter 5, of course, that they are to shepherd the flock of God and exercise oversight. And don't do it because, I hate doing this, they're making me do it, but to be willing to do it. And it's one thing to be given a responsibility and being ignorant of what you're getting ready to walk into. It's a far different thing to know, okay, yes, Lord, I surrender to this. This isn't my first rodeo. I'm dealing with people, and people can be challenging, to say the least. However, I willingly sign up for my assignment. You see, that's maturity. That is growth. That is an understanding that I'll have some sleepless nights. I'll have some days where I make decisions that not everybody's on board with. And that's why he would go on then and say, don't do it for shameful gain. And we all know the stories that we've heard. And don't be domineering. Don't do it for the wrong reason. And he goes on and uses the perfect word. Be examples. Be examples. And that's that wonderful thing that can happen for a house of worship, whether, again, it's a house church, whether it's a mega church, and all in between, to get this understanding of godly ordained leadership with whatever systems that group of people, whether they have the handle over their head of being Methodist or Baptist or Pentecostal, and of course some of the more newer terms today. And I'm not going to name those, but we know that there are popular movements, always will be. To get this understanding of, yes, we need leadership. And so the leadership has to serve as examples. And the Bible repeatedly comes back and says we are to be subject to those over us in the Lord. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's difficult. because you've lost confidence in that leader. And depending on why that is the case, sometimes it's nothing but pure speculation or propaganda or some evil design, and it just causes people to, oh my goodness, I've heard this. So again, let's keep a good vibe going on, right? And to be subject. And so the word example is this beautiful word that is still in our modern verbiage today. But it mirrors another word that has lost some significance because we're a technological culture now. We're not even, a mechanical, industrial mindset as general populace any longer. We're sure not agricultural like we once were in the formation of this country and many other countries in their formation, because people need to eat, have to eat to survive. And yet it's this word shepherd, shepherding flock. And again, there couldn't be a better example of the responsibility of one watching over how many would be in the fold, the flock, in this case, sheep. And, yeah, that's great. That guy's got 2,000 sheep, and he does it all by himself. I guarantee the dude never gets any sleep. Well, he's a shepherd. He's just got 10. Well, that's his responsibility. When I came to GraceLife Church, formerly known as Marietta Church of God, that was one of the first things that I had to keep identifying is the need for additional leadership, and it's still the case. But that word shepherd, on into now the term pastor, I would have individuals, well, we just have one pastor. So well, that's not true. I was on staff here before. I was a youth pastor. Yeah, but that's different. Different, but the same. And that is, again, shepherding people, oversight of people. And again, we go back to Moses. We go back to his father-in-law, Jethro. He goes to Moses. Moses, you're killing yourself and you're wearing them people out. Start finding those that you can assign over thousands and over hundreds and over 50s and over 10s, depending on the need, depending on the temperaments, depending on whatever the subjects are being dealt with, and share that responsibility of leadership. Here, what we read in Numbers is God said, I'm going to anoint them. I'm going to take some of the spirit that I've had strictly in you, and now I'm going to take some of that out of you and put it on them. Beautiful, beautiful picture there. So again, we are to be subject to those over in the Lord. And then he goes on, and he speaks of the suffering of Jesus as well. And so again, I love this part of it because who else could write like Peter about the sufferings of Christ? You can count them on two hands, right? But really one hand, those who were in the inner circle, Peter, James, and John. And then for Peter to be called the rock by Jesus himself. Because Peter, how can I put it? Growing up in his community of Capernaum and learning how to fish by trade by his father, going out there independently on his own with his brother, and going up in grade school there, he was known as Simon. Simon, Simon, Simon. Where does Peter come? It came from Jesus. And at Petros, you're a rock. And later on, of course, Jesus would take that same wording and expound it more and say, the faith that you've exercised in this comment, that you're recognized now that I'm not just a rabbi or the best of the rabbis in your mind. I am God. I am the Son of God, Son of Man. And my Father has revealed this to you. And for Peter to acknowledge it and speak it out, he said, it's upon this rock I'll build my church. That position of faith. And so, again, we see that he knew the sufferings like no other. He had that close contact with the master. He would witness him sleeping. He would witness him eating. He would witness him doing ministry. And so the privilege. I will tell you, as we get ready to close out today, that what we're identifying again is the work of leadership speaking to you today. This letter was for everybody, and yet it is true that some have been appointed into leadership, elder work. There's others that will be assigned that, and you sense it already, others sensing it. And I can't tell you how many people as a teenager would come to me. It wasn't my childhood church now. And but as a teenager, they come up, oh, you're going to be a preacher. Oh, you're going to be a pastor. Oh, the Lord has used you in my life. And so I was getting those testimonials, those attaboys, in a spiritual sense of, we witnessed something in you. Don't be afraid of those things. Just start praying. Just start searching. And the responsibility that comes along with it. But I will say this, over the many years now, and now typically at my age, I'll have people, when they find out I'm a pastor, it's like, oh, I wouldn't have your job. Then when I tell them I'm a bus driver, they say, I really wouldn't have your life. However, with that being said, why are they saying that? Sometimes I'm convinced it's because they can't relate. Others would say, I would never do it if God called me to it. I'm done with people. So kind of an anxiety thing there. For others, it's just understanding the aggravation that comes along with people. It's reality. And that's typically where it comes from. And then the enormity, just like Moses, like, how can I do all this? I'm done. I'm spent. Get me out of here. Send me somewhere else. Let me die. And so it is that need. But for those of you that aren't elders, doesn't feel like maybe you'll ever be called to any level of eldership, shepherding, leadership, it is, again, then honoring those that the Lord has put into your life, and making their life easier, and being supportive when you can, and prayerful. I want to read verse 5 as we close out. He said, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Goes along with what I'm just sharing. And clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. We find back in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34, it says, I'll read it to you. Proverbs 3, 34, another long list of things here. So we're just pulling one verse out. It speaks of God's attitude. Toward the scorners, he is scornful, but to the humble, he gives favor. So again, this is how God operates. You're going to reap what you sow. So back here, as we're closing out, is reminding all of us, it isn't just the elders that are to clothe themselves with humility. It is all of us. All of us. And again, that responsibility of being clothed. Today we think of signature clothing lines. I got to have this and I got to have that. There's designer fashions. When that name's attached, it's worth more. Well, nothing gets finer than the designer brand of God. Clothe yourself by his design with humility. And to, as again, he tells us that God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So the complete picture is the now and later. Clothe yourself now in humility, and your reward some in this life, but without a doubt into our eternities, we'll be clothed with honor. It goes back to the attitude, in this life, I'm to take up a cross and follow him. But one day, I'll trade that cross in for a crown of glory. As again, Peter already brought out back in verse 4 when he says, when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive an unfading crown of glory. And it all begins with humility. Let's pray together. Thank you for your word as we're in this new season, this new year. If there's not anything else in a New Year's resolution, that if we haven't already attained a good report of humility, let that be our pursuit. For those called into leadership, without a doubt, be an example, serving with humility. But all of us are to be humble before you because you said you'll give favor to us. Sometimes we're humble to serve under somebody else, and other times it's the responsibility that we have to be willing to receive that if it was just up to us, we would never accept. We would rather just be left alone. Let us not do it begrudgingly or under compulsion or learning I can manipulate and take care of myself with ill gain. Let me serve all of us with humility, knowing that there is yet a crown that will not fade, that will not rust, that will never go away, that crown of glory. Let that be our goal, among others, but let that be definitely the goal of in this life serving you faithfully, that in the next life I will be with you eternally in your presence. Oh my, what a glorious, wonderful belief and truth. We give you thanks in Jesus' name. Until next time, keep that good vibe going. God bless.